Chapter 1106. Gu Xingyin asked, "If I were to say something like that to you, how would you react? Would you cry and run out?" Cici thought for a moment. "I wouldn't cry, right? I'd probably ignore you." Gu Xingyin nodded. That was a normal reaction. If a normal girl was said to hate someone of the same sex, even if it was someone as gentle as Cici, she'd probably just ignore it with a cold face. If she had a fiery temper, she'd probably go up and fight with the other person, running out with tears of sadness or something like that. This was obviously an unusual scene. The first class was the form teacher's class. Changru was still comforting her hurt heart in some corner. The form teacher had always been very concerned about this kind of obedient student. She hurriedly asked her what was wrong. Then, as Gu Xingyin expected, Gu Xingyin was called to the teacher's office. In the office, Gu Xingyin saw Changru with red eyes. Obviously, the form teacher had found this good student. The form teacher was comforting Changru softly. When she saw Gu Xingyin, her expression immediately became serious. "Zhongzhonghuan, students should love and help each other. Look at what you've done to Changru to make her so sad." Gu Xingyin's expression was calm. "Teacher, I only told the class monitor that I don't like her." The form teacher obviously didn't expect her to be so honest. Gu Xingyin was even more honest. She looked at the form teacher and said sincerely, "Teacher, the class monitor and I really don't get along. I just don't like her. There's nothing I can do about it. I told the class monitor that I don't like her. She probably doesn't like me either. I'm a bad student. It's better not to affect a good student like the class monitor." Changru looked at Gu Xingyin with red eyes. "Zhonghuan, I don't dislike you." Gu Xingyin interrupted her. "Class monitor, please call me Zhongzhonghuan. I'm not that close to you." Changru's tears that had just dried up fell again. The form teacher was speechless when she saw this. In the office in front of her, Zhongzhonghuan was not even willing to give her face. She really believed that Zhongzhonghuan did not like Changru. This kind of thing is not something that can be changed just by teaching her a lesson. The homeroom teacher looked at Changru, who was still crying inside. In the end, Gu Xingyin was punished to be on duty for a week. The reason was that she did not treat her classmates well. Strictly speaking, there was no right or wrong in this matter. However, in the eyes of a teacher, the good student he liked and the bad student who always gave him a headache couldn't be treated equally. Gu Xingyin did not care about this. The effect she wanted was to let everyone, including her teacher, know that she didn't like Changru. She glanced at the head teacher and Changru in the office and said calmly, "Teacher, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. Class is about to start." If Changru had been a prideful girl, she would have hated her to death. However, to Gu Xingyin, she would rather someone like Changru hate her than like her. When Gu Xingyin returned to the classroom, Cici looked at her nervously. "Zhonghuan, are you okay?" Gu Xingyin smiled and shook her head. "What could be wrong? I didn't do anything to her." Cici thought about it and agreed. At the same time, she felt that the class monitor was indeed a little too sensitive. During the third period, Changru finally returned to the classroom. She did not look in Gu Xingyin's direction. It looked like she really hated her in her heart. After the fourth period, Gu Xingyin asked the system and went straight to the cafeteria. In fact, even without the system's reminder, she could find Lindsay at a glance. Some people had charisma that could be seen at a glance in a crowd. Chapter 1107. Moreover, in the dense crowd, the area around his seat was empty, which was extra conspicuous. No one could ignore the cold air coming out of his body and sit beside him. "Good afternoon, Linza." She walked over with a smile and sat opposite him without a care. Gu Xingyin swore that for a moment, she definitely heard the sound of gasps around her. Was it that scary? She found it funny. Could it be that Linza could eat people? Lindsay paused in the middle of eating. He raised his head and looked at Gu Xingyin coldly. Gu Xingyin didn't seem to notice his unhappy gaze, and returned him a bright smile. "Linza, how could there be such a girl who didn't know how to read the situation?" he said coldly. "I don't like people sitting beside me, especially when I'm eating." Gu Xingyin smiled and put a sweet and sour pork rib into her mouth. Oh, it was delicious. Linza's chopsticks clattered on the plate. He was very depressed, but he didn't know how to get angry at a girl. Gu Xingyin looked at him and asked strangely, "Why aren't you eating? The food will be cold later. It's not a good habit to waste food." Linza, "I can't eat when there's someone beside me." He meant that she could leave now. Gu Xingyin completely ignored him. What a joke. If I really listened to you and left, how could I play in the future? She put down the chopsticks in her hand and looked at Linza seriously. She said earnestly, "Then you have to change this habit. This isn't your home. Other than your parents, no one has the obligation to accommodate you." Linza. Did this girl really not understand what he was saying, or was she pretending to be stupid? He thought about her words and actions and confirmed that it was the latter. He silently picked up the plate in his hand and prepared to get up. How could he still be in the mood to eat? However, Gu Xingyin saw through his actions. She quickly finished the last bite and stopped Lin Zai's actions. "Hey, look at you. You didn't touch anything at all. Is there a need to be so serious over such a small matter?" She looked at him dotingly and said, "If you really feel that bad, I'll leave, okay? Don't skip meals. You'll be the one hurting yourself. I like you so much that my heart aches when I see you like that." After she finished speaking, she didn't wait for Lin Zai to react and left with the tray. Lin Zai, who didn't know whether to leave or stay. The onlookers. So this was possible. Their knowledge had really increased. In the end, Lin Zai still sat down and finished the food on the plate one bite at a time. However, when everyone saw his expression, they couldn't help but shudder. It was as if he had just eaten something extremely disgusting. After teasing Lin Zai, Gu Xingyin returned to the classroom in a good mood. Then, Changru stopped her at the door of the classroom. "Gu Xingyin. This big sister. Weren't you ignoring me? I've already made it so obvious, yet you still came looking for me." It's simply Gu Xingyin couldn't find the right words to describe it. But this time, Gu Xingyin was really wrong. Changru only looked at her coldly. "Zhong Zhonghuan, where's your homework from yesterday?" Homework? Gu Xingyin was confused and at a loss. When she got home yesterday, she was so focused on talking to her dad that she didn't remember about homework. Chapter 1108. Changru knew what was going on just by looking at her face. She said coldly, "There are school leaders coming over for an inspection today. Yesterday, the homeroom teacher specifically reminded you. Zhong Zhonghuan, wait for the homeroom teacher to call you into her office." With that, she turned around, leaving Gu Xingyin with a cold back view. Gu Xingyin returned to her seat. Her deskmate Cici leaned over and said, "The school leaders won't check your homework. Zhonghuan, I'll tell you where the homework is. Finish it later and send it to the office." Gu Xingyin shook her head. "Forget it. The homeroom teacher will probably know that I didn't do my homework soon." Sure enough, the homeroom teacher criticized Gu Xingyin in the next class. She told her in front of the whole class that if there was a next time, she would directly call her parents. Gu Xingyin gave Cici a helpless look. "See, I knew it." As the class monitor, it was easy for Changru to catch her small mistakes. Similarly, if Changru was determined to teach her a lesson, it wouldn't be difficult for him either. Gu Xingyin sighed in his heart. This time, she probably really hates me because of her love. Gu Xingyin obediently did her homework and went to the office with a good attitude to admit her mistakes. She also said that she would definitely pay attention in class and finish her homework on time. Her good attitude made the homeroom teacher feel that it was abnormal. She looked at Gu Xingyin's completely different style of dressing these 2 days. Although it was still a little too much for a student to pursue beauty and maturity, it was much better than before. Could it be that this student had really turned over a new leaf? No homeroom teacher and student union were enemies. Naturally, they hoped that their students would change for the better. Seeing her like this, the homeroom teacher didn't make things difficult for her. Instead, she gently comforted her that it was fine as long as she knew her mistakes and could change. Gu Xingyin walked out of the office with a smile on her face. But when she returned to the classroom, the expression on her face was back to the usual mocking half-smile. No one could tell what she said to the teacher in the office. Seeing her like this, Changru sneered inwardly. "Zhong Zhonghuan, I'm nice to you, but you don't care. Didn't you say that you wanted us to hate each other?" I'll do as you wish, but I don't know if you can bear it. Cici was a little worried about her. Cici and Zhong Zhonghuan had been deskmates for 2 months. At first, she was quite afraid of this girl with a bad reputation, but later she realized that although Zhong Zhonghuan looked a little difficult to get along with, she was actually quite a nice person. Once, a boy in class bullied her, and her deskmate returned the favor on the spot. Zhonghuan often brought her chocolates. Moreover, the current Zhonghuan had become better than before. He no longer ignored people like before, but he was a little. She blushed and touched her face. She just liked to tease herself. What Cici didn't know was that Gu Xingyin found her bashful and cute. Her face was as red as an apple, so she liked to pinch her cheeks. Oh, it felt so good to the touch. When Cici saw Gu Xingyin return to her seat, she asked worriedly, Zhonghuan, did the homeroom teacher make things difficult for you? Gu Xingyin shook her head. Don't worry. I'll be fine. Their seats were in the second row on the left side of the classroom, while Changru's seat was in the third row in the middle. Changru could see the two of them whispering intimately when he looked up. Her pen drew a line on the paper fiercely. Chapter 1109. Lindsay turned around and saw his good friend running towards him. His good friend Song Tao and Lindsay were childhood friends. Their families were very close and they were in the same high school, but they weren't in the same class. Lindsay, I heard. Song Tao looked at Lindsay mysteriously. That Zhong Zhonghuan from class 2 is chasing you? Lindsay frowned. Don't talk nonsense. How do you know? Song Tao clicked his tongue. How is it nonsense? Ask around. It's spread throughout the school now. Who doesn't know that Zhong Zhonghuan from class 2 fell in love with the school hunk Lindsay at first sight? She goes to look for you every day. For you, she's even starting to study hard. Seriously. Song Tao suddenly said, actually Zhong Zhonghuan is really pretty. I heard that she doesn't fight or skip class anymore. She's wholeheartedly focused on being a good student. She probably really likes you. Lindsay's expression didn't change. What does that have to do with me? Song Tao looked at his good friend's cold side profile and couldn't help but sigh. Sigh, I pity this girl. She's destined to fall out of love with you. This iceberg that won't melt. I don't know who can move your heart of stone. Lindsay didn't say anything. In class 2's classroom, Gu Xingyin sat seriously while Cici explained a math question to her. She solved the question correctly according to what Cici taught her. Zhonghuan, you're really smart. You can solve any question after just one explanation. Cici looked at Gu Xingyin in amazement. Gu Xingyin smiled and didn't say anything. How was she smart? She knew how to solve these questions, but in order not to arouse suspicion, she had no choice but to ask Cici one by one. Before Changru walked out of the classroom, she couldn't help but glance at their seats. She watched as Zhong Zhonghuan changed her dressing style for that boy and started to listen to class seriously and study hard. All of this was because she heard that the boy liked girls like that. Changru pressed his hand to his chest in a daze. She actually still liked Zhong Zhonghuan. If she really didn't like her, why would she ruin her outstanding image and make things difficult for her? If she really didn't like it, just as Zhong Zhonghuan had said, the two of them had already gone their separate ways. But now, she liked him so much that she was willing to change herself for him. Would there really be a result for her liking him? She shook her head. If she were a man, she would have pursued Zhong Zhonghuan no matter what price she had to pay. However, Zhong Zhonghuan clearly had a normal personality. Was he really going to risk everything to bring her onto this path? For the first time, she felt a struggle. All right, thank you, Cici, for delaying your break time after school. By the time the two of them finished talking, the classroom was already empty. Cici smiled. That's nothing. You're studying hard now. The teacher even praised me. Speaking of this, she blushed a little. Everyone knew why Zhonghuan had become like this. But the teacher didn't know that. He thought that it was his good student who had influenced Zhonghuan and made her work hard. Speaking of which, Cici looked at Gu Xingyin with some heartache. She was doing this for Linza, but the other party was still as blunt as ever. Zhonghuan, how are you and Linza now? She couldn't help but ask. Chapter 1110. Gu Xingyin's expression darkened, and Cece caught sight of it. She already knew the answer. But Gu Xingyin quickly perked up. That's it. It's not like I don't know how hard it is to woo the school beau. I'm already prepared for a long battle. Cece looked at her carefree expression and laughed. I wish you all the best. Gu Xingyin looked certain. Of course. After saying goodbye to Cece, Gu Xingyin returned home. Actually, all of this was just a facade she had created. She did like Linza, but she wouldn't lower herself to such a level for him. On one hand, it was to show Changru that she liked men, and that it would never be possible with her. On the other hand, it was to show her father that Zhong Zhonghuan was rebellious, but Gu Xingyin didn't want her father to go through 3 years of exhaustion. She would try her best to be a good daughter that her father would be proud of. Also, her final goal was to let Zhong Zhonghuan walk the path she should have walked and become the hand of God in the field of design. If she wanted to do it, she would do it to the best of her ability. She would slowly change until the day she finally transformed. As for Linza, she was sincere in chasing him, but if he was always like this, Zhong Zhonghuan wouldn't be able to keep her eyes on him for the rest of her life. Huan, your Uncle Chen's family has a wedding banquet tomorrow. Are you going with Dad? Zhong Zhiping looked at Gu Xingyin expectantly. This gaze made Gu Xingyin's heart ache. In the original owner's memory, she hadn't attended any parties with her father in a long time. Outsiders only knew that Chairman Zhong had a daughter, but they had only heard of her name and never seen her in person. Every time, people would laugh and say that Chairman Zhong treasured his daughter too much and couldn't bear to let her out to meet people. Only Zhong Zhiping smiled bitterly. In the past, Huan was young, but now that she was older, she didn't want to attend these parties with him at all. How could he be reluctant? It was obvious that he couldn't get her to move at all. Of course. Gu Xingyin smiled brightly. I've never been Dad's date before. Zhong Zhiping also laughed. After Gu Xingyin went upstairs, he rubbed his eyes. She had almost shed tears in front of her daughter. But he was really happy. She had never been so happy before. His daughter was finally sensible. She began to study hard and think for him. It was as if she had become the little princess who loved to stick to him and let him kiss and hug her. The next day was the weekend. Gu Xingyin woke up early in the morning. Zhong Zhiping had already hired a stylist for her. Gu Xingyin was happy and relaxed. She sat there and let the stylist dress her. Miss Zhong is so beautiful. The stylist's eyes were full of admiration. In her line of work, not only did she have to be good at fighting, she also had to be good at talking. She had said this to countless socialites and young ladies, both sincere and hypocritical. But this sentence was undoubtedly sincere. When she first saw Gu Xingyin, she hesitated for a moment. This Miss Zhong's temperament was too unruly. With such an aura, wearing a standard gown might not be a suitable choice. However, she was about to attend a wedding banquet, not a fashion week. It wasn't suitable for her to be too unique. However, after the makeup was done and the gown was put on, she realized that the person in front of her had changed. Chapter 11:11. She was clearly a wild and unruly girl just a moment ago. Now, she was wearing a silver silk dress and sitting there quietly. Her entire body exuded a dignified and elegant aura. The makeup artist's eyes lit up when she saw this. Being able to change her aura according to the style of the dress at the right time was a quality that only professional models could have. Many professional supermodels could also have this ability after rigorous training, but Miss Zhong was obviously born with this ability. Moreover, she was nearly 1.7 meters tall at the age of 16. She could definitely develop in this direction. However, she looked at Gu Xingyin with some regret. A lady of this status would probably not be willing to enter that circle. She mentioned it vaguely. Gu Xingyin was a little surprised, but she still smiled and thanked her for her kindness. Thank you for your concern, but I have no intention of developing in that direction for the time being. Gu Xingyin, who was dressed up, went downstairs. Mr. Zhong was already waiting for her. When he saw his daughter slowly walking down the stairs, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. Mr. Zhong only came back to his senses when he saw his daughter walking to his side. Gu Xingyin lifted her dress and twirled around. Am I very beautiful? Even Dad is fascinated by me. Mr. Zhong smiled and nodded. Yes, you are very beautiful. My Huan Huan is the most beautiful. His daughter had already grown up, but she still looked so like her mother. Gu Xingyin and Mr. Zhong got into the car and arrived at the Zhou family's wedding banquet. As expected, they saw Zhong Zhiping holding a girl's arm along the way. Looking at their expressions and Gu Xingyin's age, anyone with a discerning eye could immediately guess Gu Xingyin's identity. This is Miss Zhong, right? She's so beautiful. Such a beautiful daughter. If I were Chairman Zhong, I would definitely hide her at home and not let anyone see her. Zhong Zhiping's face was full of unconcealable joy. He had heard too many praises for him, so he didn't feel anything. However, he liked to hear praises for Huan Huan. Even if it was obvious flattery, he could still reply with a few words with a smile. Everyone could see how much he valued his daughter. Naturally, they praised Gu Xingyin even more. Some people had speculated that Zhong Zhiping had a bad relationship with his only daughter. Now that they saw the appearance of the father and daughter, they dispelled the thoughts in their hearts. If they still didn't have a good relationship, then all the children in their family were probably adopted. Brother Zhong, is this Huan Huan? You've grown so big. A middle-aged man with silver hair on his temples walked over. His complexion was very good. Gu Xingyi knew who he was. He was the chairman of the Zhou group, and the father of the main character of today's wedding. The relationship between the Zhou family and the Zhong family wasn't bad. Zhong Zhonghuan had seen this Uncle Zhou when he was young, but he hadn't seen him in recent years. Uncle Zhou. Gu Xingyin greeted him obediently. Huan Huan. Lin Zhe came here with the elders of his family. He was cold by nature and didn't like this kind of situation where people came and went. He also didn't like to pretend to be polite with people. However, in the past his family would indulge him. Now that he was getting older, they couldn't let him be willful. His mother said to him, "Ah Zhe, you're the heir of the Lin family. You can't not appear in front of people for the rest of your life, and let those people who can't be on the stage jump in front of outsiders." In their family, there were a lot of branches and illegitimate children. The family was in a mess. Lin Zhe's personality was also related to the environment he grew up in. Chapter 11-12. Lin Zhe knew that it wasn't easy for his mother. His father was a bastard. It was considered a business marriage with his mother. When they first got married, his father was still restrained. 2 years later, after giving birth to him as the heir, he began to reveal his true colors. He kept an actress outside and raised a second branch. He did everything that was absurd. His grandfather was about to give up on this son. If it weren't for the fact that he only had this one son, his father's position as the heir would probably have been stripped. When his grandfather saw that his son was useless, he began to nurture his grandson. Lin Zhe grew up with his grandfather. His father could tell that his grandfather's idea was to wait until Lin Zhe grew up before directly passing over his son and handing the Lin family over to his grandson. At first, his father saw the signs and felt that he would have to rely on his son to support him in the future. It was rare for him to show his fatherly love and ask about Lin Zhe's well-being. But how could the estrangement of more than 10 years be eliminated overnight? When Lin Zhe's father saw his son's cold and distant appearance, he roughly knew that in his son's heart, he probably didn't have a place as a father. He started to act like a demon again. He called back those illegitimate children outside and asked them to call old Master Lin Grandpa. This was to let the illegitimate children inherit the family business. Fortunately, old Master Lin wasn't a fool. He chased them out on the spot, and even said that even if he died, the Lin family's things wouldn't have a single cent of those things. Even so, Mother Lin and Lin Zhe were still disgusted. In the past, Mother Lin wasn't too strict with her son, but now she could see the urgency of the situation. This kind of business banquet gradually allowed him to participate in. Lin Zhe didn't want to let down his mother's painstaking efforts, so he could only follow her slowly. After exchanging pleasantries with the people around him, Lin Zhe heaved a sigh of relief. He looked around and saw that there was no one around. He placed the empty wine glass in his hand on the waiter's tray and slowly walked towards the balcony. It was quiet and empty here. With the soothing sound of a violin, Lin Zhe finally heaved a sigh of relief. He reached out to loosen his tie and let out a long sigh of relief. It was great without the unbearable smell of perfume and pretense. Anyway, he had already shown himself. His purpose for coming here today was almost achieved. Lindsay sat quietly on the balcony, admiring the moonlight. Occasionally, he would look back at the venue to see if there were any guests he needed to meet. A group of people who were about to enter the arena caught his attention. Lindsay knew the man in the suit. He was the head of the Zhong family, and could be considered a big shot in the city's business circle. It was said that he only had one daughter, who was about the same age as him. She had always been well protected. Lindsay, the young lady holding his hand, looked somewhat familiar. The two of them had an intimate posture. Looking at Patriarch Zhong's expression, he seemed to dote on the girl. She was probably his legendary daughter. Wait a minute. Lindsay's eyes suddenly widened. He knew why this girl looked so familiar. For an entire month, Zhong Zhonghuan would come and pester her every day. She was actually the daughter of the Zhong family? Lindsay carefully looked at Gu Xingyin. Today, Zhong Zhonghuan was wearing a luxurious high-end dress. She stood quietly beside Father Zhong and greeted the people around her with a sweet smile. Her posture and etiquette were all in line with the temperament of a young lady from an aristocratic family. She was completely different from the arrogant Zhong Zhonghuan in school. Chapter 11-13. Lindsay looked at the noble and elegant Zhong Zhonghuan in the crowd, and was a little confused. Was this quiet and sweet girl in front of him really the same person as the flamboyant and wild Zhong Zhonghuan he knew? At this moment, Gu Xingyin happened to look over. Meeting Lindsay's complicated gaze, she seemed surprised for a moment, and then smiled at him. Then Lindsay saw her tilt her head and say something to Father Zhong, who also glanced over. Then Gu Xingyin walked towards him. Lindsay subconsciously tensed up, but then he reacted. What was he doing? She was just a classmate. Why was he nervous about her arrival? Gu Xingyin even asked the waiter for 2 glasses of wine on the way. She came to Lindsay's side and handed him a glass. I didn't expect to meet you here. Seeing that Lindsay didn't let go, Gu Xingyin smiled. We're classmates after all. Aren't you going to give me some face? Lindsay reached out and took the glass in her hand. Lindsay watched as she leaned against the railing and slowly drank a glass of champagne. Although her posture was casual, it didn't reduce her elegance. The two of them didn't speak, and a strange atmosphere flowed between the two of them. Lindsay was the first to couldn't stand this atmosphere. He hesitated. You're a little different from usual. Really? Gu Xingyin turned around and smiled at Lindsay. Then in your eyes, what kind of person am I usually? Lindsay was speechless. What should he say? Say that he didn't have a good impression of her? In the end he just said lightly, You're more unruly. Gu Xingyin sneered. I hate people like you. If you don't like me, then don't like me. Just say it directly. What unruly? What you really want to say is flamboyant. Maverick? You have to twist your words 3 times. Aren't you tired? It was also at this time that Lindsay saw a familiar wildness in her eyes. That's because I live in a different environment from you. Lindsay silently said in his heart. Looking at her, it was obvious that she was doted on at home. Mrs. Zhong had passed away for several years, but there were no rumors of Chairman Zhong having a new lover, nor were there any messy negative news. Actually, just look at Zhong Zhonghuan. How could such a character be raised in a family of mutual deception? He couldn't help but retort. Aren't you dressed like this today? Gu Xingyin understood what he meant. He meant that she was also pretending. She said bluntly, Because this will make my dad happy. I want him to be happy. She then looked at Lindsay. Aren't you the same? In such an occasion. She raised her head and nodded at the lively banquet hall. You actually hate it, don't you? Lindsay's body shook. Zhong Zhonghuan, she actually saw through his thoughts at a glance. Gu Xingyin said indifferently, Don't think it's strange. After all, I like you so much. Naturally, I spent a lot of effort to find out your likes and dislikes. She was always like this. Whatever she liked, she directly put it on the table, and didn't care about a girl's modesty at all. Lindsay didn't take her words to heart in the past, but now he suddenly felt a little strange. He couldn't help but look at Gu Xingyin. What if I never like you? Will you still like me? Chapter 11:14. Gu Xingyin raised her head and finished the wine in her glass in one gulp. She turned to look at Lin Zhe. I like you. It's my business. Whether you like me or not is your business. Before I still like you, I won't give up because of your attitude. Before I still like you. Did this mean that she might not like him anymore in the future? Lin Zhe didn't know why, but when he thought of this possibility, his heart sank. You mean that no matter what I do, you won't change your mind because of it? Gu Xingyin glanced at him. Of course. Lin Zhe, you don't have to be too narcissistic. I like you and chase you like this. A large part of the reason is that I enjoy the feeling of liking you and chasing you. But this kind of liking isn't love. Feelings that can't be reciprocated will be worn away one day. At that time, Lin Zhe. She looked at him and smiled. You'll be free. No one will pester you anymore. It was a very novel theory. There were many girls who had confessed to Lin Zhe. Those girls would always say how much they liked him and were willing to do anything for him. Lin Zhe had heard too many such words, and he had never been moved by those sincere confessions. But no girl had ever said such words in front of him. I like you. It's my own business. A thought even flashed through Lin Zhe's mind. Dating such a girl might be a very interesting thing, but this thought only flashed through his mind for a moment. After seeing his parents matter, he was very serious about relationships. If it wasn't someone he could spend a lifetime with, he wasn't willing to provoke. He couldn't have a relationship without responsibility just because of novelty or interest. The conversation between the two of them ended here. Lin Zhe was still sitting in his seat. Gu Xingyin put down her wine glass and walked towards the banquet hall, where people were coming and going. Lin Zhe watched as she slid into the crowd like a clear spring and quickly blended in. He lowered his eyes and hid his expression. After the weekend, Lin Zhe was still the cold school hunk Lin Zhe. Zhong Zhonghuan had also turned back into the wild and flamboyant Zhong Zhonghuan. However, he still found something wrong in the school. During the meal, Zhong Zhonghuan would still sit beside Lin Zhe without caring about the cold air around him, but Lin Zhe didn't seem to reject her anymore. Sometimes, when Gu Xingyin came to class 3 to give Lin Zhe something, Lin Zhe would not let her take it back or throw it away. Instead, he would take out money and give it to her. Slowly, people began to guess whether Lin Zhe and Zhong Zhonghuan were dating. After all, Zhong Zhonghuan had already crossed Lin Zhe's bottom line. No one would believe that there was nothing fishy going on between the two of them. However, no one would believe that the two of them were dating. Because compared to Lin Zhe, who had accepted Gu Xingyin, he seemed to have ignored Gu Xingyin. Yes, ignore. It was as if he couldn't control what she did around him, but he wouldn't put any effort into it either. You can do whatever you want. I won't accept it, but I won't care. In fact, this description was not wrong. Lin Zhe was ignoring Gu Xingyin. After hearing her words, he knew that his reaction wouldn't have any effect on Gu Xingyin. Since that was the case, why should he make himself suffer every time? Then just pretend that she didn't exist. He would wait until the day she gave up. Lin Zhe never thought that when that day really came, he wouldn't be able to bear it. Chapter 11:15. Everyone in the school knew that Zhong Zhonghuan from grade 2 was crazily pursuing the school hunk, Lin Zhe. The teacher seemed to have received the news as well. However, Gu Xingyin's form teacher saw that this student had been serious about her studies recently, and her grades had improved a lot. She had even entered the top 100 in the last monthly exam. She didn't know if there was the power of love in this, but seeing that nothing had happened, she didn't want to interfere rashly. What if the school's interference made this student return to how he used to be? The school banned puppy love and a series of other things. In the end, it was all to not delay the student's studies. If this matter became a motivation for the students to improve, as a teacher, she didn't have much of a right to stop it. In Class 2's classroom, Gu Xingyin sat obediently in her seat and practiced questions. A shadow suddenly fell over her head. She looked up. It was Chang Ru. This was a sports class, and it was a rare break. Everyone was relaxing on the field, but there was no one in the classroom. Class monitor, what's the matter? Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows. Chang Ru shook her head out of habit and nodded. I do have something to talk to you about. Gu Xingyin put down her pen and waited for Changru to speak. Changru sat in the seat in front of her and looked at Gu Xingyin. Do you really like Lindsay that much? Over the past few days, she had seen everything that Gu Xingyin had done and how she had changed. If she didn't like Gu Xingyin to the core, who would be able to do what she did? Gu Xingyin looked at Changru with a faint smile. This doesn't seem to have anything to do with the class monitor, right? What was this woman up to now? Class monitor, are you going to tell Teacher Chen? Changru's face paled. Am I such a person in your eyes? Gu Xingyin didn't say anything, but the expression on her face said everything. Changru recalled what she had done when she was jealous and resentful of her, and her expression darkened. Indeed, she had done something similar in the past. She couldn't help but soften her tone. Don't worry, I won't do that. She looked at Gu Xingyin seriously and said, I just think that you're good the way you are, really. Zhongzhanghuan, everyone is unique. You don't have to change yourself for others and become someone you don't even know. Upon hearing this, Gu Xingyin looked at Changru in surprise. She was actually thinking for him. She looked at Changru seriously and found that his expression was very serious. These words were indeed from the bottom of his heart. Had she finally thought it through? Gu Xingyin smiled. If this is your concern, then I'll accept it. By the way, I'll answer one of your questions. I do like Linza very much. I've never liked someone so much before, and I won't again in the future. Because other than him, she wouldn't like anyone else. Then I want to make it clear that I didn't become like this for Linza. Just think of it as me suddenly coming to a realization. Changru looked at her and obviously didn't believe her. She thought that Gu Xingyin was just stubborn and refused to admit it. In fact, most people would think so after hearing Gu Xingyin's words. But Gu Xingyin didn't care. She never had to explain what she was thinking to others. Chapter 11:16. In the end, Changru sighed and left. She got the answer she wanted. It was time to let go. Gu Xingyin realized that Changru's attitude towards her had changed again. She didn't treat her as well as before, nor did she secretly oppose her after becoming enemies with her. She began to treat Gu Xingyin as an ordinary classmate. Gu Xingyin heaved a sigh of relief. She didn't reject homosexuality. She hoped that Changru wouldn't fall in love with someone like Zhongzhanghuan in the future. Stubborn love often led to the final tragedy. Gu Xingyin didn't let go of her pursuit of Linzai, but she was no longer as ostentatious as before. She would sit at the side when Linzai was eating. She would watch all the basketball games, debates, and other events that Linzai participated in at school. Her academic results had been improving at a fast pace. By the time she was in her second year of high school, she was already in the top 30. Even the people in school knew about the relationship between the two of them. The way they looked at Gu Xingyin changed from strange to blessings. This girl was really pursuing the person she liked with all her heart. Even Linzai's friends said to Linzai, It's not that I want to say this, but brother, you might not be able to find a girl who likes you so much in your life. Linzai didn't say anything. He didn't know how he felt about Gu Xingyin now. It didn't seem like he liked her. He didn't feel like he was blushing or his heart was racing when he looked at Gu Xingyin. But it wasn't completely true that he didn't like her. At least, Linzai knew in his heart that after such a long time, that person's position in his heart was still different. He had never been in a relationship, so he didn't know that the girl named Zhong Zhanghuan was using her own way to form a net of habit around him. When she was by his side, he couldn't sense anything wrong. He felt that his heart still needed to be tested by time. He thought that everything would be as he thought, waiting for him in the same place. The third year of high school arrived. Everything proceeded according to the normal steps, neither fast nor slow. At the end of the first semester of the third year of high school, more than a dozen students who lived in the city planned to have fun together. After all, after the next semester, they would not have such an opportunity again. Linzai didn't want to go at first, but he was dragged along by his brothers. Gu Xingyin went as well. They went hiking, karaoke, and soaked in hot springs. They played for a whole week. At night, they played card games and truth or dare in the hotel. Song Dao got the trump card. He rolled his eyes and said loudly, The person who got the 7 of hearts, go kiss the person who got the 7 of spades. Everyone looked at the cards in their hands. Gu Xingyin looked down. 7 of spades. What a coincidence. Lindsay pulled out the card in his hand with a dark face. It was a 7 of hearts. The two of them looked at each other, and the people around them started to jeer. The topic of these two people had been circulating for more than 2 years. Lindsay's expression wasn't very good. Gu Xingyin didn't move either. Song Dao looked and said, Lindsay, you can't even afford to play such a game? It's not a big deal. Our beauty Zhanghuan didn't even say anything. Lindsay lowered his head. Only he knew how fast his heart was beating at this moment. It wasn't that he was unwilling, but he was nervous. Seeing that Lindsay didn't move, the atmosphere in the room became gloomy. 8 chapters. Diligent Ji, who insisted on updating in the early hours of the morning, begged for a wave of votes. It was said that if you collected enough votes, you would know if the male lead kissed her or not. Chapter 11-17. They were all students of the same grade, so of course they all knew that Gu Xingyin liked Lindsay. When they found out that the people who got these 2 cards were Gu Xingyin and Lindsay, they secretly wanted to matchmake the two of them. Now the situation was a little awkward. Lindsay silently prepared himself mentally. Just as he was about to get up, he heard Gu Xingyin speak. She looked up with a smile and said, It's just a game. Don't be so serious. I admit defeat. How about 3 glasses of wine as punishment? Song Dao was secretly anxious, but when he heard this he quickly said, How can you let a girl drink as punishment? Lindsay, you have the guts to play games but don't have the guts to accept punishment. Quick, punish yourself with 3 glasses of wine. Lindsay's figure froze the moment Gu Xingyin spoke. He silently stiffened his body as he listened to her casually ask everyone to cancel the punishment. For some reason, unhappiness rose in his heart, but he didn't know what to say. He just remained silent as he picked up 3 glasses of wine and downed them. The others couldn't help but sigh when they saw his expression. It seemed that Lindsay really didn't like Zhong Zhanghuan. Even such a joke made him so angry. After such an incident, their enthusiasm had probably subsided quite a bit. After playing for less than half an hour, someone started to say that they were tired and wanted to rest early, so everyone dispersed. It was still early and Gu Xingyin couldn't fall asleep, so she got up and went to the swimming pool outside the hotel to look at the night sky. She sat alone on the bench in boredom when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw Lindsay in a thick coat. Gu Xingyin looked at Lindsay walking over under the light and secretly sighed. Handsome men were indeed handsome no matter what. Lindsay couldn't sleep at first, so he got up and walked outside. He saw Gu Xingyin sitting alone by the swimming pool. The other party seemed to be sitting alone on the bench with a blank expression. He was so lonely that he didn't seem to fit in with the entire world. Gu Xingyin. Young man, I'm just in a daze, don't overthink it. Lindsay walked uncontrollably towards Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin quietly watched him come over and raised her eyebrows. What's the matter? Lindsay paused for a moment. I think the night here is better. Gu Xingyin glanced back and did not comment on what he said. Lindsay was a little embarrassed, but he still sat down beside Gu Xingyin. The atmosphere between the two was a little awkward. Lindsay hesitated for a long time before saying, Just now. Gu Xingyin turned around. Her clear eyes made his words stuck in his throat. I didn't do it on purpose. What Lindsay wanted to say was that he didn't mean to stay still. Just now he thought about it. His previous behavior seemed to have made a girl lose face. However, Gu Xingyin did not get his central idea. She said faintly, You don't have to mind. This kind of thing is more of a prank. If it were me, I wouldn't be willing either. Her expression was very calm when she spoke, and it was impossible to tell that she was in a bad mood. Lindsay was still frowning, as if he wasn't satisfied with such an answer. Gu Xingyin looked at him and joked. What? Could it be that when you think about it later, you feel that you lost a chance to be intimate with a beauty like me? Or did you suddenly realize that you like me? Chapter 11-18. Lindsay was silent. He wasn't sure of his true thoughts, so he didn't know how to tell Gu Xingyin. His silence, however, made others think it meant something else. Silent rejection. Gu Xingyin's face darkened. She seemed to have lost interest in sitting here and watching the night sky, and got up. She said to Lindsay, "I'm going back to my room, you can enjoy it. Good night." Lindsay, "Good night." Gu Xingyin turned and walked back to her room without looking back. As she walked, she talked to the only system she could communicate with. "System, I think there's no hope between Lindsay and me for the time being." The system thought so too. Gu Xingyin was a little confused. "Logically speaking, with my experience in many worlds, although he won't remember me, I don't have any soul ties. He can't have no feelings for me." The system thought about it, and expressed that it didn't know either. Gu Xingyin was still guessing. Could it be that Lindsay's values are so high that he doesn't even allow himself to have puppy love? System. It didn't really understand. One person and one system discussed this question for a long time, but they didn't get an answer. Until the end of the event, they all went back to their own homes. Then the peaceful winter break of high school ended, and the last semester of high school arrived. Gu Xingyin decided to study hard and improve every day. This also meant that she didn't have so much time to find Lindsay every day and appear in every corner around him. On the first day, Lindsay didn't feel that anything was wrong. He even felt relieved when Gu Xingyin didn't appear around him. He felt that he still hadn't figured out how to face her. Maybe it was best to calm down and think about it. On the second day, on the third day, Gu Xingyin still didn't look for him. Lindsay started to feel a little uncomfortable. He once again returned to eating alone in the cafeteria. Logically speaking, it was a good thing for him that no one was invading his territory. However, he realized that his original habits had changed. If his previous habit was to eat quietly by himself, then in the past 2 years, he had become a habit of eating quietly with Zhong Zhanghuan. Now, the girl who suddenly appeared in his world without greeting him had suddenly disappeared again. Lindsay felt inexplicably uncomfortable in his heart. He went around to inquire about Gu Xingyin's recent situation. Knowing that she was now preparing for the college entrance examination with all her might, even eating nutritious meals that were specially prepared at home and sent to school every day, he heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it was not because of any other reason. Song Tao winked at his good friend. "Say, do you have the legendary masochistic physique? When Zhang Huan threw himself at you wholeheartedly, you ignored him. Now that she has found something more important, you are starting to care about her." That last sigh of his was full of meaning. This time, after a moment of silence, Lindsay gave his own answer in front of his childhood friend. "It's not that I don't care, it's just that I don't know what I'm thinking." Song Tao's eyes lit up. "Looks like there's hope." He hurriedly pulled Lindsay to the side and asked, "Brother, what do you mean? Could it be that you actually have feelings for Zhang Huan in your heart?" Chapter 11:19. As a close friend of Lindsay, Song Dao quite liked Zhong Zhanghuan. After all, they were brothers. Everyone hoped that he could find a good girlfriend, right? According to the situation of the Lin family, it was best if Lindsay's future wife was someone who could help him. Rather than marrying a woman who didn't know anything, Zhong Zhanghuan, who knew her background and had a strong family background, was undoubtedly the best choice. Putting that aside, Li Yundong's expression changed drastically. Song Dao still said the same thing. "Lindsay, in this world, there might never be a girl like Zhong Zhanghuan who likes you as much as she does now." As a brother, he hoped that Lindsay could be happy. Of course, if Lindsay really didn't like Zhong Zhanghuan, he wouldn't force him. When it came to relationships, it was naturally about mutual consent. If Lindsay didn't like her, even if Zhong Zhanghuan loved him so much that she was willing to die for him, it would still be a passion. But looking at it now, Lindsay clearly didn't have no feelings for Zhong Zhanghuan. Song Dao was his good brother, so Lindsay didn't hide it from him. "I think I might like her a little, but I'm not sure if this like can make me decide to continue walking with her." Song Dao looked at him with a gaze that was a little exasperated at his failure to live up to expectations. To be able to make Lindsay say such words, it proved that he definitely liked Zhong Zhanghuan in his heart. In this day and age, if you were a man, just go straight to her if you liked her. What were you still blabbering about? Song Dao really wanted to say this to Lindsay directly, but thinking about it, he couldn't. It was better to beat around the bush. Thus he asked, How do you feel when you think of Zhongzhanghuan? Lin Zhe thought for a moment and frowned. I don't think I feel anything. Song Dao held his forehead. He asked in a different way. You haven't seen each other since that gathering during winter break, right? Do you think of her? Do you think of her often? Lin Zhe nodded. He would think of Zhongzhanghuan every day. Song Dao continued to ask. After school started, Zhongzhanghuan didn't come to look for you. How do you feel? And now, the school is saying that Zhongzhanghuan didn't get a response for more than 2 years and finally let go of this relationship. How do you feel when you hear these words? The temperature around Lin Zhe suddenly dropped. He replied. For the first question, I'm a little frustrated and depressed. For the second question, I'm very angry. That was the obvious answer. Song Dao sighed. It was already so obvious, yet he was still considering it. In the end, he used his trump card. Linza, think about it again. If one day, Zhongzhanghuan doesn't like you and likes another man, what will you do? Lin Zhe imagined the scene that Song Dao described, and his expression immediately became very bad. Just the thought of it was unbearable. Song Tao knew the answer when he saw his expression. He sighed and patted Lin Zhe's shoulder. I won't say what the answer is. Linza, think about it carefully before deciding what to do. As a brother, I can only tell you one thing. A girl is willing to use 2 years of her youth to wait for you to turn back, but it doesn't mean that she will wait for you for another 2 years. The human heart will get tired. Lin Zhe's body shook as he said in a low voice, I understand. Song Dao left, leaving the space for Lin Zhe alone. Lin Zhe sat alone for a long time and finally made a decision. Chapter 11:20. Class 3. It was the end of class at noon, but other than the students who went out to solve their physiological needs, no one else left their seats. As far as the eye could see, all of them were scribbling furiously. The entire classroom was very quiet, and only the sound of pens landing on test papers could be heard. In the 3rd year of high school, even the most mischievous students began to take it seriously. This was a semester that concerned the future of their lives. They were already around 18 years old, and had begun to understand that they had to be responsible for their own lives. Zhan Huan, someone is looking for you. The crisp voice of a classmate near the window interrupted everyone's thoughts. Many people looked up curiously and saw the boy standing outside the window. The weather had begun to warm up. Lin Zhe took off his thick coat and wore a light jacket. From beginning to end, he was full of the smell of youth. Gu Xingyin stopped writing and frowned as she looked at Lin Zhe outside the window. She then looked at the gossipy eyes of many students in the class. She resigned to her fate, and put down her pen, and walked towards the classroom door. Lin Zhe stood outside the classroom and looked at Gu Xingyin. They hadn't seen each other for more than a month, and this was the first time he looked at Gu Xingyin so seriously. The girl in front of him didn't have her hair tied up in a ponytail like other girls, nor did she have soft black hair falling behind her ears. Her hairstyle was always so exquisite, as if she would change it every 2 or 3 months. There were traces of light makeup on her face. It wasn't exaggerated. Her earrings today were a few small silver crosses. On her neck was a cross necklace of the same style as her neck, a gray t-shirt, 3/4 jeans, a long trench coat, and even a rather exaggerated ring on her left hand. With her appearance, she could be photographed casually on the streets. Why are you looking for me? Gu Xingyin asked. Lin Zhe came back to his senses and asked. I want to ask, do you have time after school? Gu Xingyin thought for a moment and shook her head. I hired a tutor at home and made an appointment every day. Lin Zhe didn't give up. What about the holidays? Gu Xingyin replied. I promised my father to visit my grandfather in another city this month, so I don't have time. She frowned and asked, do you have something to do? Lin Zhe wanted to say yes, but looking at Gu Xingyin's pale face, she could tell that she had been very tired from her studies. If he confessed to her at this time, would it affect her studies? He thought for a moment and guessed that she would. He swallowed the words at the tip of his tongue and said, nothing important. Gu Xingyin looked at him suspiciously. She didn't see anything from his expressionless face, so she nodded and said, all right then. If there's nothing else, I'm going to the classroom. There are still a few test papers that I haven't finished. Lindsay could only say, "All right then, you go. I'll go back to class too." Then he watched as Gu Xingyin turned around and entered the classroom. Just like the people around her, she buried herself in the thick stack of test papers. He didn't even raise his head to look at her. Seeing her like this, Lindsay suddenly felt a little flustered. He recalled Song Dao's words. A person's heart will get tired. She's willing to spend 1 or 2 years waiting for you to come back, but she might not be willing to spend another 2 years. No way. He told himself. When the college entrance exam was over, he would confess to her. It wasn't too late. Chapter 11:21. After Lindsay's figure disappeared outside Class 3's classroom, Cece, who had been engrossed in her homework, poked her head out. "Jean Huan, what did Lindsay say to you just now?" Gu Xingyin didn't even raise her head. She answered the question while answering. He didn't say anything. Seeing that she didn't seem to care at all, Cece was a little suspicious. "Jean Huan, do you not like Lindsay anymore?" Gu Xingyin stopped writing and looked at Cece strangely. "Why do you ask?" Cece replied, "Because looking at you now, you don't really care about Lindsay anymore. You weren't like this in the past." Gu Xingyin smiled. "That's because I wasn't in my 3rd year of high school before." Now she had more important things to do. Cece continued. "Also, everyone is guessing if you don't like Lindsay anymore. You used to be so clingy to him, but now you're not like before at all." Gu Xingyin smiled. "That's not true." "But?" Cece asked curiously. "But what?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. "Nothing. Hurry up and do your homework." Just then, the bell rang for class. Cece swallowed the questions she was about to ask and began to do her homework seriously. To Gu Xingyin's surprise, not only did Cece ask, but even Changru specially came to look for her. Ever since the two of them chatted, Changru seemed to have untied the knot in his heart. In the past year or so, just as Gu Xingyin said, the two of them were in the same class. They saw each other frequently, but they were always familiar strangers. Class rep. Gu Xingyin was a little strange. The two of them no longer fought against each other and got along quite harmoniously. "Did you have a conflict with Lindsay?" Changru asked hesitantly. Gu Xingyin shook her head. "Why are you all asking this question?" "I didn't." Changru looked at Gu Xingyin. "Actually, it's not that we're curious, but your reaction is too strange." Gu Xingyin smiled. "Because I no longer put all my focus on him?" Changru did not say anything. That was indeed what she was thinking. Gu Xingyin laughed. "Didn't you tell me before? Let me be myself, don't change because of others. Why is it that now that I've found a direction to work towards, all of you are not used to it?" Changru also laughed. "Maybe it's because you were too crazy in the past." It made people feel that Linza was the only thing in Zhong Zhanghuan's life. Gu Xingyin shook her head. No one is the only one in a person's life. For example, right now the only thing more important than Linza in my life is the college entrance exam. The conversation between the two ended here. The college entrance examination was getting closer and closer. Gu Xingyin never went to Linza again. No one had the time to care about the gossip between the two of them anymore. Occasionally, Gu Xingyin would hear some news about a freshman confessing to Lindsay, but Lindsay rejected her. Lindsay participated in the city's high school boys basketball competition and won the Best Player award. The closer it was to the college entrance exam, the busier she became. Not only did she have to prepare for the college entrance exam, but she also had to prepare for her dream of being a designer. There was only a month left until the college entrance exam. In the original plot, the luxury brand representative who had specially come to Z for the fashion week finally arrived. Gu Xingyin sent the work she had prepared for an entire month to the address. At this moment, there was still a month until the college entrance exam. As the time approached, the atmosphere in the class became more and more tense. Chapter 11:22. Even the homeroom teacher started to walk around the class after every class, so that the students wouldn't be too nervous and could relax after class. The school would prepare pure milk and fruits for the students to replenish their nutrition. Gu Xingyin's heart was very calm. She knew that she wouldn't do badly. She also knew that she didn't need to do well. But she knew that Father Zhong still cared about the college entrance examination results, so she would hand in a beautiful answer sheet. The 2-day college entrance examination ended. As soon as Gu Xingyin came out of the examination room, Father Zhong, who had been waiting outside, took her home. He had already prepared a nutritious meal for his precious daughter. When she returned home, the housekeeper also told Gu Xingyin a piece of good news. She had received a reply to the design director's work that she had sent. The content of the reply was within Gu Xingyin's expectations. The other party was very interested in her work and requested to meet her. Gu Xingyin called the contact number left on the letter. The other party's assistant answered the phone and found out who Gu Xingyin was. The assistant was very enthusiastic and made an appointment with Gu Xingyin. Obviously, the design director had already told him about it. The next afternoon, Gu Xingyin met the famous design master. The two chatted for a long time. The master was very amazed by Gu Xingyin's talent and said that he could write a letter to his old friend and recommend Gu Xingyin to his school. Everything developed exactly the same as in the plot. When Gu Xingyin returned home that day, she received a call from Lin Zhe. "Do you have time tomorrow? I have something to say to you." Gu Xingyin thought about it and felt that she didn't have anything to do. "Let's have lunch together at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning," she suggested. Lin Zhe was obviously very happy. "Okay, I'll text you the address later." The two hung up the phone, and within a few minutes, a text message appeared on Gu Xingyin's phone. It was a very famous Western restaurant in the city. The next day, Gu Xingyin dressed up and arrived at the appointed place at 10:30 a.m. The system suddenly said, "Host, I need to sleep for a while." Gu Xingyin felt a little strange. Why do you always want to hibernate? It was the same in the previous world. When Xiao poisoned Aunt Zhou's family, the system went into hibernation. Otherwise, she could have helped that family. The system answered honestly, because the host completes more and more missions. Every time the host receives a gift from the world, the system that has signed a contract with the host will also receive benefits. There is too much energy stored in the system, and it needs to be digested through hibernation. Gu Xingyin keenly grasped the main point. According to what you said, you may need to hibernate often in the future. The system gave an affirmative answer, "Yes, host." However, once the system has completed its evolution, it won't need to hibernate anymore. Gu Xingyin asked, "How long will it take for you to finish evolving?" The system was very honest. "I don't know, host." Gu Xingyin. "Okay, I understand." The system's body flashed white and then disappeared in front of Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin slowly waited by herself. The waiter had already come to ask if she needed anything. She shook her head. After the waiter left, she looked at her phone. It was 10:47 a.m. It was already late. Chapter 11:23. Time passed slowly, and the needle on the watch accurately pointed at 11 o'clock. Lin Zhe hadn't arrived yet. Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes. No matter what the reason was, she was angry. Didn't he even know how to call? At 11:10, there was still no one, and there was no sound from her phone. When the waiter came over again to ask if she needed anything, Gu Xingyin said that there was no need. She picked up her phone and sent a text message to Lin Zhe, then got up and left. She was still wondering why Lin Zhe asked her out today. Now that she thought about it, maybe he was just on a whim? Lin Zhe didn't reply to her text for 2 days. On the day the college entrance examination results came out, Gu Xingyin also received an invitation from a distant country. Gu Xingyin didn't attend the teacher appreciation banquet. When Lin Zhe finally came to school and wanted to apologize to that girl and express his feelings, he couldn't find her. He asked a classmate from class 3, and that person replied, "You mean John Huan? She went abroad." Yesterday, she even showed off the admission invitation and plane ticket in the class group. It's the famous Grice School of Design. Becoming a designer seems to have been her dream all along. The word abroad was like a heavy hammer hitting Lin Zhe's head, and his face turned pale. That classmate looked at him strangely and said, "Lin Zhe, are you okay?" Lin Zhe came back to his senses and said absent-mindedly, "It's too hot today. I just came in from outside, so I might have a heat stroke." That classmate was still a little worried. Lindsay forced himself to say, "I'm fine, I'm just a little dizzy. I'll be fine after drinking some water and resting." He returned to his seat in a daze. Everything that happened after that was meaningless in Lindsay's eyes. He watched numbly as others cried and laughed, toasted and took photos. He just sat there quietly, as if all of this had nothing to do with him. Yes, it didn't matter. But he always gave people the feeling that he wasn't easy to get close to, and no one noticed that something was wrong with him. When everything was over, Song Dao, who came to look for him, saw that something was wrong with his expression. At this moment, most of the people had left, and Lindsay was the only one left in their private room. Lindsay looked up with a blank expression on his face. She went abroad. Song Yao was stunned for a second before she realized who he was referring to. He was a little surprised. Zhong Zhanghuan went abroad? When? Lindsay shook his head. I don't know. I just found out. Song Tao immediately grasped the main point. No, you said that Zhong Zhanghuan went abroad and didn't tell you? Lindsay nodded. Song Tao frowned. This shouldn't be. She shouldn't have hidden this from you. Did she confess to you and you rejected her? Lindsay shook his head again and talked about the matter from a few days ago. F***CK. Song Tao's eyes widened. You mean to say that you took the initiative to ask her out, but she waited for you for more than an hour, and then you didn't even send her a message? Song Tao sighed. Brother, I have no choice. No matter which girl it is, they can't stand it. Lindsay growled. I didn't King expect that I would receive news of my mother fainting and being hospitalized as soon as I left the house. When I reached the hospital, I remembered to call her and realized that my phone had been stolen. At that time, I thought that I would explain it to her in 2 days. Who knew? Who knew? Who knew that when he looked for her, he couldn't get through her phone, and she wasn't even in the country? Chapter 11:24. Lindsay's heart felt empty. No one would understand what it felt like to be full of passion only to have a wave of cold water poured over you. Song Yao sighed. Can you find Zhong Zhanghuan's current contact information? If you can, go and talk to her. Lindsay shook his head. I just tried. Her phone number has changed, and she's not online on social media. She must have changed everything when she left the country. None of this was important. What Lindsay was most worried about was what kind of feelings Zhanghuan had when she left. Would she think that he had deliberately stood her up and had completely given up on him? It was a brand new world overseas. Would she meet someone she liked there? Would she pursue another man like she had pursued him back then? Lindsay sat on the chair dejectedly. He only felt that his life was gloomy. In fact, he was worried too much. When Gu Xingyin was still on the plane, the system that had woken up from its hibernation told her what had happened to Lindsay. Okay, it doesn't count as him standing me up. I won't blame him, Gu Xingyin said. The system was a little strange. Why was the host so easy to talk to this time? As expected, Gu Xingyin hadn't finished speaking. But I spent 2 years on him and still couldn't warm up this stone. Now I don't have the patience. Gu Xingyin picked up the drink provided by the first-class cabin and took a sip. Only know how to cherish something after losing it? I'll teach him a good lesson today. There's no such thing in the world. The system trembled silently and lit a candle for Lindsay. It sounded like the host was angry. Gu Xingyin was really angry. If Lindsay didn't like her, then forget it. The problem was that he obviously liked her, but he was still dragging his feet for so long. If Zhong Zhanghuan wasn't Gu Xingyin, if she didn't have the system to tell her the truth, would Zhong Zhanghuan be willing to forgive Lindsay? No, she wouldn't be willing. Gu Xingyin would forgive Lindsay, but it wouldn't be so easy. He had to realize that there were some things that wouldn't just stand there and wait for him. Gray School of Design was indeed one of the top design schools in the world. Many well-known design masters came from here. The school was very busy. Gu Xingyin didn't even have time to go home for the new year for 2 whole years. In the end, Mr. Zhong flew over himself and had a reunion dinner with his daughter in a foreign country. 5 years. For the first 2 years, Gu Xingyin studied all kinds of professional knowledge in school. For the next 2 years, she followed her tutor and learned from him. In her last year, she began to design some works on her own. Zhong Zhonghuan did have some outstanding talent in the field of design. Several of her works had been recognized by masters in the industry. As a rising star in the fashion industry from the East, her reputation gradually spread in the fashion industry. While developing her career, Gu Xingyin did not forget to pay attention to the situation of these people. Back then, Changru had taken the college entrance examination and entered a top-notch school in the country with outstanding results. In the school, he had met his lover. Now she had graduated a year ago and was working in a foreign company. Her work ability was outstanding and her future was promising. Moreover, she was living with her lover and seemed to be living a good life. He probably wouldn't be in the mood to do anything to his former first love. 8 p.m. There will be a building event on the eve of the 21st. It will last for one day and will end at 24 p.m. on the 21st. Everyone is welcome to participate. Moi. When building the building, don't forget to vote for Gao Lingji. Chapter 1125. As for Lin Zhe, he also entered university with the college entrance examination, but he chose a local university famous for financial management. When he was in his third year of university, he started to come into contact with the Lin family's family business. During his internship, Old Master Lin directly gave him a department. Now Lin Zhe was the general manager of the Lin Corporation. Young, handsome, and the crown prince of the Lin Corporation. Many young and beautiful girls wanted to be in front of him. Not to mention marrying into a rich family, having a romantic relationship with such a handsome general manager was also a good thing, okay? Unfortunately, Lin Zhe was famous for not understanding romance. The women outside of the Lin Corporation all rejected him with cold faces. The employees of the Lin Corporation, other than rejecting him, also included a termination letter. Such a ruthless style caused the number of girls around him to decrease a lot. Lin Zhe's reputation for not understanding romance also spread. But there were still many girls who were quite confident in themselves. They felt that those people couldn't get Lin Zhe because they weren't good enough. And they might be the Cinderella who moved the prince's heart. Song Dao, the only one who knew Lin Zhe's thoughts, sighed, saying that the girls were thinking too much. Song Dao came to the headquarters of the Lin Corporation. The employees of the Lin Corporation all knew that he was a good friend of the general manager. The general manager had personally said that there was no need to stop him. Song Dao went all the way to the general manager's office on the top floor without any obstruction. The office was very quiet. Lin Zhe was looking at something in front of the desk. Song Dao immediately saw the fashion magazine spread out on the sofa. Lin Zhe's secretary had always been puzzled by the general manager's inexplicable attention to this fashion magazine. After all, Lin Zhe's personality didn't seem like someone who pursued these things. Song Dao was probably the only one who knew the reason behind this. He picked up the magazine and opened the front page to see this familiar person. Best New Designer by APB. TSK, Zhan Huan has been doing well these 2 years. In the picture, Gu Xingyin was dressed neatly. She held an exquisite trophy in her hand and smiled brightly while surrounded by a group of models. Lin Zhe looked up and put down the information in his hand. He didn't speak. Song Dao suddenly looked at him and said, "It's been 5 years, Lin Zhe. What are you thinking in your heart? If you really love her so much, go find her. No matter how much you struggle and endure here, she won't know." Lin Zhe didn't speak. In the beginning, he was really busy. He was busy with his studies and fighting with the people in his family's company. But in the end, he had completely gained a foothold in Lin Group. As long as he wanted to, he could go to Grey Academy to find Gu Xingyin. But he didn't dare. He was afraid that if he went over, he would see Gu Xingyin nestled in someone else's arms with a smile on her face. In front of Song Dao, he did not need to disguise himself. Lin Zhe covered his face and said in a low voice, "All the hesitation and fear in my life have been given to her. I don't dare to look for her." Song Dao looked at his good friend and couldn't help but sigh. Who would have thought? 5 years ago, Zhong Zhonghuan presented his heart to Lin Zhe, practically begging him to accept it. But at that time, Lin Zhe didn't realize his own heart. 5 years later, Lin Zhe put all his attention on Zhong Zhonghuan, but he didn't even dare to make a phone call. As someone who had watched the entire process, he only felt that all of this was simply too dramatic. Perhaps this was the so-called heavenly Tao's reincarnation? She had tasted bitterness, and now Lindsay was going to pay it back double. Chapter 11:26. Zhong, is this your hometown? The handsome blonde man asked Gu Xingyin curiously. Gu Xingyin nodded. Ladle, follow me. Be careful not to get lost. The man quickly leaned forward and put one hand on Gu Xingyin's waist. He lowered his head and whispered in Gu Xingyin's ear. I will follow Zhong closely. Gu Xingyin's expression didn't change. Ladle, do you want me to replace you for my recent show? The arm around her waist suddenly dropped. Ladle sighed and said, You Orientals are always so boring. Gu Xingyin glanced at him. This is called being reserved. I'm not as unprincipled as you. Ladle shrugged. This industry has always been like this. The fashion industry was originally a very messy industry. Men and women, everyone looked at each other, and had a consensual one-night stand. It was too common. Gu Xingyin was young, good-looking, and talented in fashion design. It could be said that her future was almost smooth. There were undoubtedly a lot of models who wanted to develop a relationship with such a designer beyond work. But it was obvious that Gu Xingyin had no interest in this. What made Gu Xingyin dumbfounded was that there were women in addition to men looking for her. Homosexuality was very common in the fashion industry. There was even a saying that 9 out of 10 men in the fashion industry were gay. After a few words with Ladle, the others returned to the hotel they had booked. Gu Xingyin went directly to the Zhong family. It had been more than 2 years since she had last returned home. She had only come back once in the 5 years she had been abroad. That time, she had been in a hurry and hadn't been able to stay at home for long. This time, she had returned to China because there would be a fashion show here. She had prepared several works of her own. As for Ladle, he was a very famous supermodel in the industry. He was a model whose name was on the supermodel rankings. The fact that Gu Xingyin was able to invite him could be said to have benefited from his teacher. Mr. Zhong had already received news that his daughter was coming back. Today, he pushed back all his work and waited at home for his daughter's return. Dad. As soon as Gu Xingyin got home, she gave her father a big hug. Mr. Zhong's eyes were filled with tears as he looked at his daughter whom he hadn't seen in 2 years. My Huan has become prettier again. He wasn't lying. After being in the fashion industry for several years, Zhong Zhonghuan's overall image had changed greatly. Small details like dressing could inadvertently change a person's impression to others. Overall, the current Gu Xingyin looked much more exquisite than before. Will you stay at home for a while this time? Mr. Zhong asked. Gu Xingyin had already calculated that in the first half of this year, other than this fashion show, she had nothing else to prepare. As for the usual designs, he could also complete them at home. She smiled and said, Don't worry, Dad. I can stay at home for a few months. Mr. Zhong looked at his daughter and suddenly remembered something. Have you found a boyfriend in the past few years abroad? Gu Xingyin covered her face. How old am I? Dad, how worried are you that I won't be able to get married? Mr. Zhong sighed. I'm not worried about that. He still asked. Have you been in contact with him in the past few years? The him he was referring to was Lindsay. Back then, Gu Xingyin had told him that the person she liked was Lindsay. In the past few years, Mr. Zhong had also admired Lindsay. However, he didn't know what was going on between the two, so he asked. Chapter 11:27. Gu Xingyin was silent for a moment before she said, Dad, don't worry about this. I'm still young. Seeing that she didn't want to talk about it, Father Zhong could only go along with it. Okay. Dad won't interfere with you. You can do whatever you want, okay? Only then did Gu Xingyin smile. The father and daughter had a happy meal. On the other side, Lindsay also knew that Gu Xingyin had returned to China. Under his influence, Song Tao had been paying attention to Gu Xingyin for the past few years. Of course, he also knew that she had returned to China. He received a phone call. Lindsay, let me tell you. If you really like her, go for her if you're a man. Take advantage of this opportunity. Otherwise, I heard that there are so many handsome models in the fashion industry. Be careful that your Zhong Huan will be seduced by some handsome guy. Lindsay responded in a low voice. He was reading a newspaper with a big photo. Gu Xingyin was walking with a blonde foreign man. The two of them were very intimate. The man even put his hand on Gu Xingyin's waist. The headlines on the newspaper were naturally aimed at the gimmick. New designer Zhong Zhonghuan's mysterious boyfriend in the industry. New designer and model boyfriend show off their love in high profile. Whether it was the photos or the comments, in Lindsay's eyes, they were extremely dazzling. Song Tao was still talking on the other side of the phone, but Lindsay's mind was no longer here. In the evening, Gu Xingyin's phone rang. She took the phone and looked at it. It was an unknown number. Worried that it was from a business partner, Gu Xingyin picked it up. Hello. There was no word on the other side of the phone for a long time. Gu Xingyin seemed to have expected something and didn't speak again. The two sides fell into a long silence until Gu Xingyin said, "No matter who you are, if you don't speak, I'll hang up." Zhonghuan. Lindsay finally spoke. After 5 years, Gu Xingyin almost didn't recognize the man's voice. "Do you have time tomorrow?" Gu Xingyin said bluntly. "Time? Are you going to break up with me again?" Lindsay hurriedly said, "Zhonghuan, I had a reason for that time. I didn't mean to stand you up. Let me explain." "When and where?" Gu Xingyin interrupted him. "Do you really want to listen to my explanation?" Lindsay only realized what Gu Xingyin was saying halfway through. He was overjoyed and quickly reported a time and a place. "All right, save your explanation for tomorrow. I'm going to rest now." The other party didn't seem to want to talk to him anymore, but Lindsay was already quite satisfied. "Good night then." Gu Xingyin hung up the phone. The next day, Gu Xingyin arrived at the meeting place on time. This time Lindsay didn't miss the appointment. In fact, he arrived at the meeting place an hour early. When Gu Xingyin sat down, she sized him up carefully. In 5 years, this man had changed drastically. His appearance had completely matured. Unlike the exquisiteness of an 18-year-old boy, the edges of a man were revealed. Compared to 5 years ago, he was less exquisite and more handsome. In general, whether it was the Lindsay 5 years ago or the Lindsay 5 years later, he would always be the type that women liked. Lindsay was also looking at Gu Xingyin greedily. Actually, he had been paying attention to her changes in the past few years. But knowing and seeing with one's own eyes were two completely different concepts. Chapter 11:28. Gu Xingyin looked up and saw Lindsay's dark and deep eyes staring at her without blinking. "What do you want to tell me today? Tell me." Gu Xingyin picked up the coffee in her hand and took a sip. Lindsay thought for a moment, and decided to start with the matter of him standing her up. After all, this was a misunderstanding between the two of them. Gu Xingyin listened to his story without saying a word. "So Zhonghuan, I really didn't mean to make you wait for nothing," Lindsay said anxiously. Gu Xingyin's expression didn't change after hearing all this. I know. This has nothing to do with you. I don't blame you," she said casually. Lindsay's heart sank. To be honest, he would rather the person opposite him react more strongly after hearing his words, or even scold him, because that meant that the other party had been brooding over this matter all these years and couldn't forget him. However, Gu Xingyin's calm reaction made it seem as if the incident back then was just a small matter in her eyes, unremarkable. Then what about her feelings for him? Did it disappear with the passage of time, just like what happened to this matter? Lindsay suddenly felt that the air seemed to have thinned. He clenched the cup in his hand and asked with difficulty, "How have you been all these years?" Gu Xingyin was the opposite of her. She was extremely relaxed. "Not bad." There was silence again. Gu Xingyin slowly stirred the coffee in her hand with a coffee spoon, and waited for Lindsay to speak. Lindsay paused for a moment and finally said, "Then, have you had anyone by your side all these years?" "What do you mean?" Gu Xingyin asked with a faint smile. Lindsay looked up at her. Gu Xingyin's eyes were very clear, as if there was nothing in them. But Lindsay knew that she did it on purpose. She wanted to force him to say what was in his heart. Lindsay closed his eyes and finally said the words that had been in his heart for 5 years. "I like you, Zhonghuan. Can I pursue you?" After saying that, he stared at Gu Xingyin, wanting to see his reaction. Gu Xingyin looked up at the man in front of her and sighed in her heart. It had been 5 years, but this man was still so inexperienced when it came to love. She nodded without hesitation. I don't have a boyfriend. Of course I can. Before Lindsay could rejoice, she continued. As I said back then, you pursuing me is your own business. It has nothing to do with me. She looked at Lindsay with a strange expression. If you said this to me 5 years ago, I would probably be very happy. But now, Lindsay, it's too late. No. Lindsay's gaze locked onto her. It's not too late. As long as she wasn't in love or married, he wouldn't be late. Gu Xingyin raised her wrist and looked at the time. I have to meet my teacher in the afternoon, so I can't chat with you anymore. Lindsay said, I'll drive you. Gu Xingyin shook her head. I drove here myself. I won't trouble you. Gu Xingyin walked out of the cafe, leaving Lindsay sitting there alone. After a long while, he made a call. Song Dao arrived quickly. Lindsay's first sentence was, I met Jean Huan. Song Dao looked at him carefully and realized that he didn't look too happy, but he didn't look too disappointed either. So, what was the situation? Chapter 11:29. Lindsay briefly recounted the conversation between the two of them. Song Tao's eyes widened. After hearing this, he didn't know why, but he suddenly felt a sense of schadenfreude. He coughed dryly and said, So it's really as I expected. As the saying goes, every dog has its day. It's your turn now? Lindsay glanced at him and frowned. Tell me, what do you think Jean Huan means? Song Dao was about to despair at his brother's EQ. He held his forehead. Do you still need to ask? Hurry up and chase after her. Lindsay glanced at him. Of course I know. I won't give up. I'm just not sure what she means to me now. Song Dao looked at him with disappointment. I really wonder how you managed to gain a foothold in the Lin Corporation. If you brought half of your IQ in the business world to love, you and Zhong Zhonghuan probably wouldn't be like this now. If she really gave up on you and didn't like you anymore, would she still tacitly let you pursue her? With Zhang Huan's qualifications, if she didn't have feelings for you, would she have no one by her side for 5 years? This girl is obviously throwing a tantrum. There's no problem. You've wasted so many years of her time. It's only right for her to throw a tantrum and want to punish you. Song Dao egged his good friend on. This time, don't let go of this opportunity. No matter how much Zhong Zhonghuan likes you, you should really thank the heavens that a girl can do this for you. Lindsay's heart was suddenly enlightened. He said to Song Dao, Thank you, brother. When I get Zhang Huan, I'll treat you to a meal. Song Dao looked at his energetic appearance and sighed in his heart. I'm afraid you're going to suffer this time. What he said just now was indeed what he was thinking. It was just that he didn't say some things, afraid that it would dampen his good friend's enthusiasm. Based on his understanding of Zhong Zhonghuan, this girl wasn't willing to suffer losses. She had probably given Lindsay the biggest concession in her life. Now that Lindsay wanted to start over, it wouldn't be easy. But thinking about it from another perspective, if he, Song Dao, met someone like Lindsay and wanted to start over? If I don't torment you until you're half dead, I won't be called Song Dao. Therefore, regarding the fate that his good friend was about to face, Song Tao expressed his love joy, and wished that he could help see. On the other side, Lindsay returned to the company and immediately asked his secretary to think of a way to get Gu Xingyin's group's activity plan, which was the itinerary for a period of time in the future. This kind of thing wasn't too confidential, and he could get his hands on it with some effort. However, the secretary was a little confused as he looked at the task given to him by his general manager. Could it be that he had guessed wrong? Was the general manager actually a fashion maniac? She shook her head and threw these strange thoughts out of her mind. It wasn't easy to find out about her boss's gossip. She just had to obediently complete the tasks assigned to her by the higher-ups. To be able to become the general manager's secretary, her ability was naturally not for show. That afternoon, a thick itinerary appeared in front of Lindsay's desk. Lindsay flipped through the pages one by one. Secretary Wang, postpone everything for tomorrow morning. I have something to do in the morning. Yes, General Manager. Secretary Wang was a little puzzled. There was originally a department report meeting tomorrow morning, but it seemed like he could only push it to the afternoon. However, he hadn't heard of any activities for the general manager before. Chapter 11:30. After Secretary Wang left and closed the door, Lindsay slowly ticked off some items with a pen. 9 a.m. on the 13th, the whole day on the 15th, and 1:30 p.m. on the 16th. These were all activities related to Zhong Zhanghuan on the itinerary. Zhong, are you nervous? Radel approached Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin looked at him calmly. I'm fine. Radel looked at her in disbelief. Zhong, why are you so calm every time? This is your first fashion show in your hometown. Gu Xingyin nodded. That's right. She turned to look at Radel. But no matter how nervous I am, will it change the result of my fashion show? Radel looked at Gu Xingyin speechlessly. That's right, but Zhong, emotionally speaking, it's normal to be nervous, expectant, and excited at this time, isn't it? Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows and looked at him. Who said I'm not excited? Her eyes flickered with the light of determination to win. This show can only have one result, and that is success. Radel looked at such a woman with some fascination. This enigmatic Oriental woman always refreshed his understanding of her again and again. It should be very interesting to be with such a woman, right? For the first time, Radel, a playboy, began to think about the idea of spending his life with a woman. The tea stage was very busy now, and all kinds of preparations were in full swing. Gu Xingyin raised her hand and looked at the time. You should go and prepare for my opening model. That's right, Radel was the opening model of Gu Xingyin's fashion show. The most important part of a fashion show was the opening and the finale. The opening and finale models also reflected a designer's connections and status in the fashion industry to a large extent. With Radel's status, even if it was a top designer's fashion show, he was enough to be the opening model. Radel suddenly turned sideways and hugged her. I wish you all the best, Zhanghuan. The two words Zhanghuan were actually in Chinese. Gu Xingyin was stunned for a moment. She could hear the encouragement and blessing in his words. She hugged Radel back and smiled. Thank you for your blessing, Radel. Radel suddenly said, How's my Chinese? Zhong, this is something that I specially found someone to learn for 2 hours. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but laugh. Well said. Then, Radel blinked and leaned over. Can I pursue you? Zhanghuan. Gu Xingyin turned around in surprise. Seeing Rader's rare serious expression, she shook her head. We're not suited for each other, Rader. Rader shrugged. How would we know if we don't try? Without waiting for Gu Xingyin to speak, he turned and left. I'll go and prepare first. Seeing Later leave, Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief. She had just seen seriousness in Later's eyes. It seemed that she needed to have a good chat with Ladle after this fashion show. The two of them were not suitable for each other. No one knew that the interaction between the two of them had been witnessed by another person. Lindsay saw Gu Xingyin, who had obviously dressed up, chatting intimately with another man. He knew the man. It was the male model Radel who had been photographed with her intimately not long ago. Chapter 11:31. Lindsay felt that his footsteps were very heavy. He came here full of passion and confidence to win back Gu Xingyin's heart. All his chances of success had to be based on the fact that the other party didn't have a new sweetheart. He should feel confident, but seeing this situation, he suddenly felt uncertain. Maybe they were just good friends? After all, foreigners like to use exaggerated body movements to show their love. Lindsay calmed himself down and walked to Gu Xingyin's side. Zhanghuan. Gu Xingyin turned around and saw the well-dressed man standing behind her. This man wasn't wearing a suit and leather shoes, which was rare. Gu Xingyin had to admit that Lindsay's appearance was indeed unique. In the past few years, she had seen countless handsome, tall and stylish male models, but in terms of appearance, it was difficult to surpass Lindsay. That was the fashion industry, which was known as the gathering place of beauties. Gu Xingyin asked in surprise, "What are you doing here?" Lindsay looked into her eyes. The other party's eyes were very sincere. It was obvious that this sentence came from the bottom of her heart. In other words, Jean Juan felt that it was strange for him to appear here. Lindsay's breath stagnated. He said, Jean Juan, did you take what I said yesterday to heart? I said that I want to pursue you. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows. So you're pursuing me now? Lindsay retorted, specifically since we met yesterday. Gu Xingyin nodded. Okay, I got it. She turned around and was about to leave. Lindsay stopped her. Jean Juan, what do you mean? What do you mean? Lindsay felt a little helpless. I just saw you and that ladle. Gu Xingyin looked sideways at him. Ladle and me? Gu Xingyin's mind turned and suddenly sneered. Lindsay, do you think I, Jean Huan, am the kind of woman who would flirt with you when I already have a boyfriend? Her expression suddenly turned cold. Lindsay, don't think too highly of yourself and don't think too highly of me. She suddenly felt tired. Lindsay watched as the other party turned around and left without looking back. His hand grabbed her hand faster than his thought. Jean Juan, that's not what I meant. Gu Xingyin struggled. Let go of me. Lindsay's hand didn't move. Look back at me, Jean Juan. Gu Xingyin turned around impatiently, but was momentarily stunned by the heaviness in his eyes. She had never seen such a helpless and sad expression on Lindsay's face. At this moment, Lindsay unreservedly exposed all his uneasiness and apprehension for the past 5 years in front of Gu Xingyin. I'm very uneasy, Jean Juan. For the past 5 years, I've been thinking about you all the time, and I've also despised myself for being useless. I'm afraid that you've forgotten about me. I'm afraid that you've found someone you like more. Give me a chance, okay? Gu Xingyin admitted that when she saw Lindsay like this, her heart softened for a moment. But it was only for a moment. Her tone softened for a moment. I have something to do now, Lindsay. Lindsay's expression became lonely. He obediently let go of Gu Xingyin's hand. Gu Xingyin watched him lower his eyelids, his long eyelashes fluttering like butterflies. The light shone down, casting a shadow on his face. At this moment, she saw a sense of vulnerability in this man. Chapter 1132. Resisting the urge to comfort him, Gu Xingyin turned around and went backstage. Turning around, Ladle leaned against the wall with his arms crossed and looked at Gu Xingyin. Is that man the reason why you rejected me? At this time he had already changed his clothes. The black hard metal style of the fashion set off the man like a king in the dark night. Gu Xingyin looked up at him. It has nothing to do with anyone, Ladle. We're not suitable for each other. Ladle still had a cynical smile on his face. Why? Gu Xingyin said. What I need is a lover who will be loyal to me for the rest of my life. Ladle, ask yourself, can you do that? Without waiting for Ladle to speak, she immediately said. Okay, hurry up and put on your makeup. Be careful not to be late. She immediately went backstage to see the models who were about to go on stage later. Ladle was left standing there alone. After a long time, the smile on his lips fell. How do you know that I can't be loyal to you for the rest of my life, Jean Juan? Gu Xingyin's fashion show finally opened with all the preparations complete. Throughout the whole process, Gu Xingyin sat below the stage and carefully observed every detail. When the last model came on stage, the warm applause from the audience told her that it was a success. The fashion show ended perfectly. Countless reporters had already turned their eyes to the designers of these fashions. Ms. Zhong Huan. Ms. Zhong Huan, why did you come to this city to hold a fashion show? Do you think this fashion show was a success? About you and the famous model Ladle. Lindsay looked at Gu Xingyin, who was surrounded by reporters. He had a feeling that he would never be able to get involved in her world. Gu Xingyin answered the reporters' questions with a smile the entire time. When it was about time, she smiled and said, That's all for today's interview. If there are any more questions, my assistant will answer them on my behalf later. Escorted by her assistants, she passed through the turbulent crowd and disappeared from everyone's sight. As soon as she got in the car, Gu Xingyin received a text from Lindsay. Very good. She put her phone aside. When she left, she saw Lindsay standing quietly outside the crowd. The other party had been watching her until she managed to escape. She rubbed her eyebrows. What was the most unbearable thing for women? A cold and powerful man who only showed his inner fragility and tenderness to you. Especially when he didn't tell you anything. All he did was silently protect you with his gaze and concern. Gu Xingyin admitted that she was a little shaken. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. Linza, if you want to get my heart, this is far from enough. Lindsay drove home and walked out of the garage to the door. He happened to see a package being delivered to his door. The man's eyes lit up when he saw Gu Xingyin. Are you Miss Zhong Zhanghuan? Gu Xingyin nodded. Hello. The man handed her the package in his hand. There's a package for you. Gu Xingyin hesitantly took it, signed her name, and carried it home. She remembered that she didn't buy anything. She sat in the living room and opened the package. It was a huge crystal gift box, but the thing inside was covered with something. So mysterious? Gu Xingyin slowly opened the gift box and lifted the thing that was used to cover it. The thing that was revealed made her breath stop for a moment. The night watch ended. Speaking of which, there were still 2 days left this week. Tonight was New Year's Eve. Gao Lingji would like to make a goal that she had never reached before, okay? That was tens of thousands of recommendation votes this week. She still needed 3,000 votes. In 2 days, everyone vote the votes in your hands. In addition, there will be a building event on New Year's Eve starting at midnight tonight. Please look at the comments section for details. There will be a red packet reward on the designated floor. The time limit is 1 day. Don't miss it. Moi. Chapter 1133. A crystal box full of perfumed lilies. These perfumed lilies were still at their most beautiful moment. Each of them was in full bloom. Gu Xingyin could even smell the refreshing fragrance of the lilies. Perfumed lilies were Zhong Zhanghuan's favorite flowers. Gu Xingyin touched them with her finger. She didn't know what method he used to make these perfumed lilies into such lifelike specimens. Between these beautiful and delicate flowers, there was a simple and elegant piece of paper. On it were beautiful words written with a fountain pen. May your beauty and talent be like these perfumed lilies, never withering. Happiness and smiles will always take care of you. Fu Xinghuan. Fu Xinghuan. This was Gu Xingyin's self-introduction to Lindsay when she and Lindsay officially met for the first time. My name is Zhong Zhanghuan, Zhong for love at first sight, Zhanghuan for joy. Her mood suddenly became very good. He knew how to be romantic, so he wasn't too hopeless. Gu Xingyin placed the crystal box of perfumed lilies on the bedside table in her room. On the other side, Lindsay was scribbling something on his notebook with a pen. When Secretary Wang came in, he saw the general manager's serious look. It was said that a man in a serious state of work was the most handsome. Secretary Wang narrowed his eyes and admired his general manager's beautiful face. In the end, he didn't dare to disturb Lindsay, and quietly put the document in his hand on the desk. At this time, if Secretary Wang had the courage to take a look at Lindsay's notebook, he would find that the other party was seriously studying not some business secret or important decision, but how to make your sweetheart happy. Some of the words had already been crossed out with red lines, such as a sincere confession. The latest one to be crossed out was to give her her favorite thing. As for Lindsay, he was staring at his notebook and struggling with what to do next. Gu Xingyin had also been troubled recently, because she didn't know why Ladle had gone crazy and started to pursue her. Of course, Ladle had said this to Gu Xingyin many times. But this time, it seemed like he was serious. Because this morning, Randall suddenly came to Gu Xingyin. I've already severed all ties with them. Now, do I have the right to pursue you forever, Zhanghuan? Gu Xingyin felt a headache coming on as she looked at Ladle's serious expression. What was he doing here at a time like this? In all fairness, Ladle was handsome, humorous, and rich. He was indeed a good choice for a lover. But that was for other girls. For Gu Xingyin, Ladle was a very good friend. But that was how it was. The relationship between the two could only go this far. She stopped herself and said, Radel, I told you a long time ago that we are not suitable. Radel lowered his head. Gu Xingyin's height of 1.7 meters was so petite in front of him. Is it because we're not suitable for each other, or are you unwilling? Gu Xingyin fell silent. She raised her head. Both. Radel, let me tell you clearly. I already have someone I like, and I will be with him for the rest of my life. Ratel's smile fell. I don't believe you, Jean Juan. I've known you for so many years, but I've never seen a man in front of you. Jean Juan looked at him seriously. You've seen it, Ratel. Don't deceive yourself. Chapter 1134. Ratel's eyes trembled. Is it the man from that day? That man had left a deep impression on Ratel. His first reaction was him. It turned out that he was right. Gu Xingyin answered his question with silence. Ratel was a little unwilling. When did you start? I've been by your side for 5 years. In terms of time, I'm afraid I'm earlier than you. A low and cold voice came from behind. Lindsay walked out of the shadows around the corner. He didn't know how much of their conversation he had heard. We knew each other before Jean Juan went abroad. The two men faced each other for the first time. Ratel didn't want to be outdone. So what if you knew Jean before me? I've known her for 5 years and I've never heard her mention that she had a boyfriend. Lindsay didn't hold back. This is between the two of us. No matter what happens between Jean Juan and me, it has nothing to do with an outsider like you. Not in front of Gu Xingyin, but in front of anyone. Lindsay's IQ was online. Although Lindsay was arguing with Ratel, his eyes were bright. Looking carefully, there was even a flash of joy in them. How could he not be happy? Although Jean Juan hadn't said it to him personally, she had admitted in front of another man, a man who was pursuing her, that the person she liked was him. Ratel was speechless by Lindsay's words. He turned his head to look at Gu Xingyin. At this time, the key to the decision was undoubtedly Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin glanced at Ratel. At this time, she could only make one choice. Ratel, leave first. I have something to say to him. Ratel's beautiful blue eyes dimmed. He took a deep look at Gu Xingyin and asked, Zhong, do I really have no chance at all? Gu Xingyin looked at him. Ratel, my meaning has always been clear. You are a very good friend. He could only be a very good friend. Ratel suddenly laughed and shrugged his shoulders. Well, Chong, I wish you happiness. Gu Xingyin also smiled. Thank you. Ratel left in a carefree manner. However, when he reached a place where the two of them could no longer be seen, he stopped and leaned against the wall. It was still a little uncomfortable. He thought. For the first time in his life, he wanted to start a serious relationship. But it ended before it even started. Only Gu Xingyin and Lindsay were left. Jean Juan. Lindsay called out to Gu Xingyin. His eyes were sparkling, which reminded Gu Xingyin of a child who had received his favorite candy, although it was somewhat inappropriate to use candy as an analogy for Linza. Let's find a place to talk. Gu Xingyin glanced at the hall, which was not hidden at all. If someone were to eavesdrop on them, it would be very interesting for tomorrow's newspaper. The two of them chose a place nearby. Anyone could tell that Lindsay was in a good mood. Although there was no smile on his face, the aura around him was extremely gentle. If Secretary Wang saw him here, he would definitely suspect that there was something wrong with his boss. Jean Juan, I'm very happy now. Gu Xingyin glanced at him. What's there to be happy about? Lindsay laughed. He rarely smiled. Although it was a little strange to use the word stunning to describe a man, Gu Xingyin had to admit that he was indeed stunned by him. Clang! Her thoughts were interrupted. She looked up and met the waiter's apologetic gaze. I'm sorry, I'll get you a new cup right away. There was obviously a drink spilled on her tray. Chapter 1135. The waiter's face was red. Gu Xingyin saw this and could only sigh that beauty was misleading. Lindsay didn't seem to feel anything. He just looked at Gu Xingyin without blinking. I heard what you said. You also said that you didn't like me. Lindsay said softly, and his tone seemed to be a little coquettish. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows. Don't put a label on me. I never said that I didn't like you. Lindsay's expression became happy. It seemed that all his emotions were in the hands of Gu Xingyin. One sentence made him smile, and the other made him silent. Sir, madam, your drinks. A soft voice broke the atmosphere between the two. It was still the waiter from before. Her expression had returned to normal at this moment, but Gu Xingyin still saw that her eyes stayed on Lindsay for a moment before she got up and left. The waiter left, and there were only two people left in this small space again. Lindsay suddenly had an epiphany. He understood Gu Xingyin's hidden words. I like you. But just because I like you doesn't mean that I'm willing to be with you. He asked directly. Then Zhanghuan, what do you want me to do for you to accept my pursuit and become my lover, my wife, and the mistress of the Lin family? Gu Xingyin's eyebrows didn't move. Do you need me to teach you how to please a girl? This was the first time the two of them sat together calmly and talked after 5 years. After that, Lindsay sent Gu Xingyin home as he wished. After getting Gu Xingyin's approval, Lindsay finally stopped restraining himself and began to pursue Gu Xingyin openly. Everything seemed to have been turned upside down. 5 years ago, Gu Xingyin pursued Lindsay, but Lindsay was always so cold. 5 years later, the roles were reversed. Lindsay began to follow Gu Xingyin around, and now it was Gu Xingyin's turn to ignore her. Both of them were not nameless people. News of the two of them spread quickly. Of course, the news was that the head of the Lin family, Lindsay, was crazy about the famous designer Zhong Zhanghuan. Basically, wherever Zhong Zhanghuan appeared, the general manager of Lin Group would be there. There were even some people who didn't have the means to see Lindsay. They specifically researched Zhong Zhanghuan's schedule and blocked Lindsay at some fashion industry gatherings. Someone really did succeed, and the romance between the two of them spread even further. The first person to call was Song Tao. I say, Linza, you're not being honest. I've been giving you advice for so long. You actually didn't tell me that you've made such great progress? Lindsay replied in a good mood. I'm going to tell you after I succeed. I'm still working hard. Song Tao roughly understood what was going on. He said, all right. I'll be waiting for your good news. When the time comes, don't forget this meal. The next to know the news were some of his former high school classmates. After all, there were many rich people among his high school classmates. Now there were also many people in the business world. Back then, the matter between Zhong Zhanghuan and Lindsay was a well-known matter in school. After graduation, Zhong Zhanghuan went abroad, and the entanglement between the two of them ended without any results. Many people thought of Ho Hai and secretly sighed. Now Lindsay didn't keep a low profile when pursuing Gu Xingyin. He almost wanted everyone to know that he was pursuing Zhong Zhanghuan. Chapter 1136. Gu Xingyin had just finished an appointment with a brand when she received a message. When she was abroad for a few years, she had basically cut off all contact with her former high school classmates. After she came back, an active member of her former class somehow got her contact information and pulled her into a group chat. It was filled with her former classmates from grade 12, class 3. The message was from Cici. Zhanhuan, the class has decided to organize a class reunion. It's the day after tomorrow. Do you have time to come? Gu Xingyin thought for a moment. She didn't seem to have anything to do. She replied to Cici, I don't have anything to do. I can go. Send me the time and location. Gu Xingyin arrived at the hotel on the day of the reunion. When she opened the door to the private room, there were already more than 20 people sitting inside. Gu Xingyin looked at them one by one. 5 years was enough to change a person completely. Other than a few people who left a deep impression on her, most of the faces were unfamiliar. Zhanhuan. A surprised voice sounded. Gu Xingyin turned around. A girl wearing an off-shoulder sweater with her hair tied up in a bun was looking at her with a smile. She looked at this somewhat familiar face and took a second to react. Cici. Cici laughed. It's rare that our great designer still remembers me. Many people came over to greet Gu Xingyin. Cici was the most familiar with her and sat next to her. Gu Xingyin looked around and asked, Why don't I see Changru? Cici laughed. I remember that you two had the worst relationship in high school. Why do you still remember her now? Could this be the legendary deep hatred, deep love? Gu Xingyin laughed as well. I'm just a little curious. Cici said, I heard that Changru will come too, but she might be a little late. Just as she finished speaking, the door to the private room was pushed open again. The elegantly dressed woman who came in, wasn't that Changru? Even though they hadn't seen each other for 5 years, Changru's popularity was still as high as ever. Most of the students in the class remembered this class monitor and went up to greet her. Changru also saw Gu Xingyin. After exchanging pleasantries with the people around her, she walked towards Gu Xingyin. Long time no see. Changru smiled at Gu Xingyin. Cici pointed at the seat beside her and gestured for Changru to sit down. Zhan Huan was just asking why you weren't here, and now you're here. Changru smiled at Gu Xingyin in surprise. Zhan Huan has been thinking about me for so long. It seems like you really hated me in high school. Her words were mostly teasing, and she couldn't help but laugh as she spoke. By the way, I heard that you are still struggling with Linza? Changru asked as he looked at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but laugh. What do you mean by entangled? Changru rolled his eyes. I think you have a bad temper. How can you be so muddle-headed when it comes to Linza? If it were me, I would have given up long ago after pursuing him for less than 2 years. Cici couldn't help but interrupt. Our Zhan Huan isn't the one pursuing someone now. Everyone knows that Linza is pursuing our Zhan Huan. Changru had been overseas on a business trip recently, so she was a little uninformed. Hearing this, she was very interested. Oh, what's the situation? Cici then chattered on about the matter to Changru one way or another. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but laugh as she listened. This version of the story was really full of twists and turns. It was a good show. If the male and female leads in this story weren't her and Linza, she really wouldn't have known that this story was about her. Chapter 1137. Things like you love me, I love you, but we can't be together, family opposition, and all kinds of melodramatic scenes appeared in the novel. Cici was in the middle of her story and was unhappy to be interrupted. After glaring at Gu Xingyin, she realized that this was the main character and felt embarrassed. Zhan Huan, ha ha ha. Gu Xingyin didn't think it was a big deal. She said, all right, do you really think you're reading a romance novel? Why would there be so many twists and turns? The two of us did have a small misunderstanding back then. Seeing that Cici and Changru were looking over with interest, Gu Xingyin smiled mysteriously. However, this is a secret between the two of us. Cici looked at Gu Xingyin resentfully. Zhan Huan must have done it on purpose to take revenge on her for spreading gossip about him. That was why he didn't tell her. Then what's the situation between you two now? Changru couldn't help but ask. She looked at Gu Xingyin. She was completely different from when she was in high school. But one thing hadn't changed. Zhong Zhonghuan was a woman who could easily move people's hearts. Although she already had a lover who was ready to spend the rest of her life with her, Changru still paid more attention to Zhong Zhonghuan, the first person she fell in love with in her life. Isn't that the situation? Gu Xingyin didn't want to say much about the two of them. Cici interrupted. The two of them. Rumor has it that Linzai is pursuing Zhan Huan, but Zhan Huan didn't agree. Changru looked at Gu Xingyin when she heard this. Gu Xingyin didn't comment on Cici's words. This also proved that what Cici said wasn't groundless. Changru suddenly clapped and laughed. That's good. Zhan Huan, don't agree so easily. Let Linzai have a taste of what it's like to pursue someone bitterly. You have to know that I didn't like him for a long time back then. Pfft. Cici couldn't help but laugh. She looked at Changru. I didn't expect you to be such a class monitor. At that time, I really hoped that Zhan Huan and Linzai could be together. As the three of them chatted, the class was slowly filled up. The class reunion after graduation was nothing more than a competition of career and love. Now most of the people in the class were still young. Many of them had just graduated from university for 1 or 2 years, and had just started their careers. There were also many who got married relatively early. The earliest ones even had a child, which made all the single dogs envious. The man, who had recently married a rich girl, became the target of the group of boys in the class and directly poured alcohol on the table. After dinner, someone suggested that they go to a nearby KTV to have some fun. Everyone agreed since they had nothing to do. Walking out of the hotel, Gu Xingyin couldn't help but shiver when the night wind blew. A familiar car stopped in front of her. The car door opened and Linzai's figure appeared in front of everyone. Yo, our school hunk is here. A few of them were drunk and didn't care about what they said. Some people silently shut their mouths when they saw Lindsay's meticulous outfit and the car he drove. Why are you here? Gu Xingyin asked. I heard from Song Tao that your class seems to be having a party, so I came to take a look. Oh. Gu Xingyin replied indifferently. Are you guys preparing? Lindsay looked at them. They seem to be having an event. We're going to sing. Lindsay, do you want to come with us? Cece said quickly, but she regretted it as soon as she said it. Chapter 1138. Looking at Lindsay's appearance, he was a busy man. Also, it wasn't appropriate for him to go karaoke with them in such formal attire, right? Most importantly, with Lindsay's personality, would he refuse, or would he refuse, or would he refuse? But what Cece didn't expect was that Lindsay would actually say yes. Cece looked at him in shock. Did she hear wrongly? Lindsay told everyone to wait for a moment. Then, everyone watched as his figure crossed the road and entered a branded women's clothing store. Cece silently looked at the brand and thought for a moment. Was half a year's salary enough to buy such a piece of clothing? Wait. Why did Lindsay go to a women's clothing store? She suddenly remembered that Jean Huan seemed to have said something about it being cold at night. It couldn't be. Cece's eyes widened. Soon Lindsay's figure came out of the store with a shopping bag in his hand. Sorry for making you wait. Lindsay nodded to everyone. Then he opened the bag in his hand and took out the clothes inside. It's cold at night. Be careful not to catch a cold. He gently put the jacket in his hand on Gu Xingyin. I didn't have time to choose carefully. Just wear it. Lindsay's voice seemed a little apologetic. Everyone watching the whole process. F***ck, this public display of affection caught them off guard. Cece blinked her eyes and screamed in her heart. Just wear it. Just wear it. Evil capitalist. Every time I pass by, I can only look at the clothes that I dream of buying, but I'm still so reluctant to wear them in your mouth. There's no harm without comparison. Gu Xingyin was about to speak when Lindsay realized her intentions. His attitude changed instantly and he immediately said with some grievance, Don't mention money to me. You said that I can pursue you. Then have you heard of suitors charging money for gifts? Gu Xingyin. Who taught him that? It's only been a few days, and his skin has become so thick? Cece couldn't stand it anymore. Let's go to the KTV next door. Lindsay looked up. That's the Lin Corporation's business. It's fate that everyone chose this one. It's my treat today. Everyone, play as you please. The atmosphere of the crowd behind him immediately became lively. After watching for a while, Changru stood beside Cece and sighed. I finally believe that every dog has its day. Just from this short period of time, one could see how the two of them usually interacted with each other. As she thought about it, she began to gloat again. Serves you right, Linza. Back then, Jean Huan liked you so much, but he didn't know how to cherish you. Looking at Jean Huan's expression, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that he was deliberately tormenting Linza. Lindsay said that he wanted to play with everyone, but with him around, most people couldn't let go. He probably knew this as well, so he only stayed for a while before leaving. Only then did the people in the private room become lively. A few girls sat beside Gu Xingyin and chatted with her, asking about Lindsay. Gu Xingyin slammed the cup in her hand on the glass coffee table and looked at them with a faint smile. What do you want to know? Wouldn't it be faster to ask him directly? Those girls' expressions turned ugly after being rebutted so rudely by her. One of them even muttered, What are you so smug about? Aren't you just relying on the fact that you shamelessly pursued him for 2 years in high school and made the first move? You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.